Hey, this is Nick Butler from the Charleston County Public Library, and I'm standing at the corner of America and Columbus Street in one of Charleston's most historic neighborhoods called Hampstead Village. Now, if you haven't heard of that before, it's hiding in plain sight. So this is a neighborhood that's part of downtown Charleston today, but it was created in 1769 as an independent village just north of the urban settlement of Charleston. So this is a neighborhood that was created by Henry Lawrence. He purchased about 100 acres here on the banks of the Cooper River, and we are just about a quarter of a mile north of downtown Charleston. And this is a place that was pasture land in the 18th century. And Henry Lawrence bought the land, subdivided it, laid out streets. So there are about a dozen streets with historic names. Hanover Street, Amherst Street, Wolf Street, Blake Street, Drake Street, America, and Columbus. These are all names that Henry Lawrence gave to this neighborhood in 1769 when he subdivided it and started advertising lots for sale. And so this neighborhood is celebrating its 250th anniversary. And when you drive down Columbus Street in Charleston today, you're driving down the main street of the village of Hampstead. And here at the intersection of what today is America and Columbus Streets, this is a 4.5 acre green space known as Hampstead Mall. This is the original village square laid out in 1769, making it one of the oldest green spaces in the city of Charleston today. So originally, America and Columbus Streets did not cut through the park. So when you come down Columbus Street today, you're seeing 4 separate green spaces. And that's an unnatural separation of what was once originally the village green. So America Street, directly behind me, was cut through the park in 1956. And Columbus Street was cut through going east and west in 1905. I'm standing here in front of the Palmer campus of Trident Technical College, and this is part of the historic fabric of Hampstead Mall. We're at the northwest corner of the original village square, and this is now part of the parking lot of Trident Tech. And also over to my left, you might notice the cigar factory that was built in the 1880s, and in the far distance, smokestacks for the city incinerator. But we'll talk about that in just a minute. So one of the reasons that you might not have heard about the historic fabric of this neighborhood is because, well, really, even though the neighborhood is 250 years old, there's not any 250-year-old built environment fabric in this neighborhood. And that's because of 2 wars that came through Charleston, one in the 18th century and one in the 19th century. So first of all, during the American Revolution, there was a growing neighborhood here, about a decade old, and a number of people had built houses, and actually pretty nice houses. But then on the 9th of May, 1779, when the British seemed to be just about to attack Charleston, the governor of South Carolina ordered Hampstead to be burned on purpose, to be razed to the ground, because it was actually blocking the view between the American defenders, who were back where Marion Square is today, and the British, who were coming from the north down the peninsula towards Charleston. Hampstead was considered expendable. It was in the way. So residents were given a few hours to collect some belongings, and their houses were torched on purpose. After the American Revolution, it took a while for the neighborhood to recover. So some people started rebuilding. Some people, instead of building large houses, they built smaller rental tenements. So the neighborhood recovered a bit, but not quite as affluent as it had once been right before the American Revolution. And then it all happened again. During the War of 1812, as you might know, the British did not attack Charleston, but they did attack Washington, D.C. and burn the White House. And the British did lay siege to Baltimore Harbor. And here in Charleston, the government and the citizens in general felt as if the British might be here any minute. So in a big emergency in the autumn of 1814, the citizens of Charleston with the local government banded together and constructed a line of fortifications stretching from the Ashley River on the west to the Cooper River on the right. And it was a zigzag line of earthen entrenchments that cut right through this neighborhood. And in fact, right where I'm standing in 1814 and 1815 were constructed barracks for artillery soldiers who were going to be defending the northern approach to Charleston. And directly behind me was an even larger fort made of earth, and it didn't last that long, and nobody remembers Fort Washington, built directly behind me in the autumn of 1814 and the beginning of 1815. And Fort Washington was part of those emergency fortifications, and its purpose was to overlook the Cooper River. But the war was over before the British attacked, and these expensive fortifications that the people of Charleston had spent 6 months laboring on were suddenly totally obsolete. The smokestacks that you see on the Charleston horizon, especially as you're coming across the Ravenel Bridge into Charleston, those are part of the Charleston Incinerator that opened in 1935. At that time, it just had one smokestack and was later expanded. But this is the first modern kind of garbage disposal facility in urban Charleston. Prior to that time, the city collected garbage and dumped it on the salt marshes on the Cooper and the Ashley River. And in fact, there's a low spot in East Bay Street just before you come up to Cooper Street. And that is the vestige of Vardell's Creek that was filled in by the city with garbage in the early 20th century. And the smokestack is part of that incinerator facility that was a place where garbage was collected and burned and went up into the atmosphere. And that continued into the later part of the 20th century. But one of the reasons that those smokestacks were built at this specific site is because this is one of the highest spots on the peninsula. This is in Hampstead neighborhood, this is Hampstead Hill. This is a natural bluff overlooking the Cooper River. And so I'm here near the corner of Blake and Drake Streets, as a matter of fact. And behind me is Cooper Street, where the smokestacks are. And that is part of the original landscape of Henry Lawrence's Hampstead Village. But this is an area that was fortified during the American Revolution by both the American forces and then the British forces, with fortifications at the site because it's a high bluff. And during the War of 1812, as I mentioned just a moment ago, a new fortification called Fort Washington was built directly behind me at the intersection of what is now Cooper Street and Drake Street. Blake and Cooper Streets, adjacent to the smokestacks. That fortification didn't last very long. It was dismantled in the 1820s, and this area went back to being a residential neighborhood. So when you come through Hampstead today, you're not going to see colonial era buildings. You're not going to see even post-Revolutionary War buildings. You're going to see buildings, the oldest buildings in the Hampstead neighborhood are from the 1830s, 1840s, and mostly after the Civil War, because this neighborhood has regenerated multiple times over the years, and it's got a pretty interesting story. If you'd like to learn more about the history of Hampstead neighborhood, check out Charleston Time Machine episode number 131, celebrating the 250th anniversary of Hampstead here in downtown Charleston. So I'm Nick Butler at the Charleston County Public Library. I'll see you in the future.